Hey everyone, yesterday night out of nowhere as usual, Blizzard put up Classic TBC's Phase 5 on the public test realms, which include the famous Isle of Quel'Danas, the Magister's Terrace 5-man dungeon, and of course Sunwell Plateau, the new raid coming with Phase 5. So players had the chance to explore around the isle, do dailies, clear the dungeon, and most importantly, sink their teeth in Sunwell Plateau. As of the time of writing this video, nobody has cleared it yet, but the high-end guilds like Newman or SF allowed us to have a pretty good idea of the real difficulty of this raid. Today we're gonna be talking about that and much more regarding Phase 5, so without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with what we're all gonna have to go through eventually, the Isle of Quel'Danas. A lot of people may not know this, but this daily hub actually has its own progression system. Think of it as an Terrace in Legion. The more dailies players complete, the more foothold you gain on the isle, and the more content gets unlocked. And it's awesome to see that Blizzard actually is going through the effort of recreating that for people who want to experience it again or didn't have the chance to experience it at all. So the way it works is that at first, the Shattered Sun Offensive only offers you 2 simple dailies to do. As more and more players complete those 2 dailies, you get to unlock the next area of the isle. 2 more dailies get unlocked that way, and more vendors get added. And then rinse and repeat until the server completed enough dailies to unlock all the content the island has to offer. So what is that content exactly aside from dailies? Well, obviously you first get to unlock the portal from Shattered to the isle itself. At first you have to go through Ironforge or Undercity to get there. After that, players will unlock a blacksmith, which has some crazy strong Badge of Justice gear to sell. You'll be buying some of these pieces right away when this blacksmith is available, and you'll probably be keeping them for a while, if not until Wrath even. Of course, there's also the famous Epic Gems vendor. You get to buy any gem of your choice in exchange for 15 Badges of Justice. Needless to say, you should really start farming as many badges as you possibly can and save them for Phase 5. You will not regret it. There's also PvP vendors that get unlocked here, namely ones where you get to exchange tier 4 and tier 5 tokens for the equivalent season's gear. This was actually made available in Shattered since Phase 3, so it's gonna be interesting to see if Blizzard decides to add Season 3 gear to these vendors now. And finally, the last thing you get to unlock on the island is a buff and a title. The buff is called Kiru's Song of Victory, which gives a stamina and intellect buff and works not only on the isle itself, but even inside the dungeon and the raid. Quite useful for progression. As for the title, it's called Of the Shattered Sun. You get to have that if you're exalted by paying 1000 gold. Of course, when you think Isle of Quel'Danas, you also think Magister's Terrace, the new 5-man dungeon coming with Phase 5. This is actually the first time a dungeon was released mid-expansion back in the day, and Blizzard would carry that tradition into Wrath and beyond. But Magister's Terrace is quite a nice dungeon. It has some unique raid-like mechanics to it that have you prepare more than you usually would and puts your abilities to the test, more than you would for a typical dungeon encounter. In that regard, this dungeon was seen back in the day as a very tough one to go through in comparison with the other ones, especially on Heroic. Nevertheless, I think it's gonna be quite easy for us in 2022. The reason you may want to do this dungeon, even if you're actively raiding every week, is that this drops some quite solid pieces of gear, the most iconic of which is Shard of Contempt, a very solid melee DPS trinket with expertise on it and an AP proc. Of course, we also have a ton of cosmetic items in Magister's Terrace, the most iconic of which is the Orb of the Sindore, a toy that transforms you into a Blood Elf for 5 minutes. Unfortunately, it's on a 30-minute cooldown, so you'll only get to accomplish your fantasy of going Horde for about 16% of the time. But it's better than nothing, I guess. The Phoenix Hatchling, a cool-looking pet, and of course the most sought after by collectors, Swift White Hawk Strider, a mount with about a 4% drop chance from Kael'thas on Heroic difficulty, usable by any race. Good luck on this. Alright, let's now finally move on to the raid, Sunwell Plateau, known by many as the hardest raid in the Burning Crusade, and it definitely lives up to that reputation. As of the time of writing this video, so far, out of the guilds who streamed it on Twitch at least, nobody has managed to get past the Eredar twins, which is obviously quite unusual for a classic raid. People typically clear everything in a couple hours, even on PTR servers, but Sunwell is looking quite promising at least for the time being. Back in the day, Sunwell lasted for a solid 62 days, until the Yale SK Gaming earned the world first title. But what a lot of people don't know is that the reason why this raid lasted for so long isn't really due to its difficulty, but mainly because of time gating. You see, the first 3 bosses of Sunwell were available right away when the patch dropped in TBC, but there were 3 gates blocking each one of the 3 remaining bosses. The gate to Eredar Twins, for example, opened on April 8th. A couple days later, Nirlum killed Eredar Twins world first. The gate blocking Muru opened on April 29th. SK Gaming grabbed world first just 5 days of progress later, on May 4th, and Kill Jaden was made available on May 20th. Again, 5 days later, SK Gaming grabbed world first. Now, here's the good news today. Since Eredar Twins are available on the PTR right now, it seems like there's no time gating in Sunwell, which is awesome news and is very promising for the future of classic raids, which had time gating back in the day. I think Blizzard made the right decision. Time gating was never a good thing in WoW, and I'm glad they're getting rid of it, at least for classic. Nevertheless, Sunwell was and will be to an extent a tough raid for most players. And no, you're not included in that if you parse 99s and your guild is clearing BT in 2 hours or less. But the truth is, the vast majority of players in this game are casuals, and most casuals will have a hard time in Sunwell, which is a good thing. Raiding was always meant to be challenging back in the day. Finally, let's now talk about something that's a concern for a lot of players. This PTR, like all the previous ones in fact, came out of nowhere, and no one really expected Sunwell to go up for testing this soon. Because typically, when a PTR for any phase is up, it usually means that 3 to 4 weeks later, the phase itself will go out on the live servers themselves. So really, this means that Classic TBC isn't gonna last much longer anymore now. So what I did is I looked at the release date of each one of the previous phases of Classic TBC and when their PTRs went live. What it shows is that typically PTRs last for 20 to 30 days on average. Phase 3 is a bit particular because the PTR went up and then went down for a good 20 days throughout the Christmas and New Year's period. The actual number of days the PTR was up for Phase 3 was actually 29 days. As for the phases themselves, it really depends. Phase 1 lasted 92 days, Phase 2 148 days, and Phase 3 only 56. But that's because Zulaman is meant to be a mini phase, not really to be counted. Either way, what this shows is that so far, Classic TBC has been up for 318 days. That's just under 10.5 months. Going through 4 phases and a whopping 8 raids in just 10 months is quite crazy, honestly. To be fair, when TBC released originally in 2007, it had pretty much all of this content available from launch. Maybe it was Blizzard's intent to rush the content to make it kind of authentic. That still doesn't explain why we're only gonna have 3 months of Black Tempo and Hyjal though, assuming Sunwell releases in 1 month. That's not authentic at all, considering expansions, including TBC, last around 2 years typically. My guess is that Blizzard has a certain timeline in mind for the new retail expansion and where that will fall in between Classic Wrath of the Lich King, and they're somehow trying to rush TBC to release Wrath in time to fall into that schedule. But maybe I'm wrong and we're simply gonna have 6 months of Sunwell. Who knows? And that's about everything there is to know about Phase 5. As I said, we should expect Sunwell to be released 3 to 4 weeks from now. At least that's typically how long PTRs have lasted in TBC. If the PTR is taken down midway, we should expect that duration to be increased. Otherwise, Sunwell will probably be released either on May 12th or 19th at the latest, or maybe 5th at the soonest. That's my prediction. Between now and then, there will be a lot of content on the channel, from preparation guides for Phase 5 to boss guides for Sunwell Plateau. So if you don't want to miss that, you know what to do. With that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to give it a like and subscribe to the Classic WoW Curios channel for more content like this. I will see you guys in the next one very soon. Bye for now.